It's like my own personal wind machine too. See, like atmospheric. Okay. Hi, Eric.
Hi, how are you?
I'm okay. Been working.
Hmm. You and me
I
both.
yeah, I finished a giant piece. Do you hear that echo?
Yeah, do you, well, not an echo, but do you have your mic connected?
I do.
Why is it all the way over there?
Is that better?
You should have it like right in front of you.
You told me that it should not be right in front of me.
I never said that.
Yes, you did. You did say that.
I
You
don't,
said that it,
when did, okay, okay. A, when have I ever said that? B, when has it never been in front of you?
I thought that it was supposed to be off to the side. All right, let's start. Hi,
Okay.
everybody. Welcome
All right.
to episode 14 of the Mom and Eric podcast.
14. That's pretty good.
14. Yeah, it is really good. I'm really impressed with us.
Mm.
Um, and today we are going to both talk about Dune 2, which I just saw and Eric saw a week ago. And we're also going to, maybe if we have time, because we do want to be more disciplined about our time management, uh, we're going to talk about our reactions to the Oscars.
I don't have
So
that much to say about Dune, if I'm being honest, but so I feel like we could fit it in, but you know.
I have something to say about
Okay,
Dune.
we all have something to say. It's just like it doesn't have to. Yeah, okay, whatever.
Okay, fine.
Let's get on with
Okay,
it.
let's just get on with it. Are you in a mood today? How are you?
No, no, I'm just very excited to talk to you. What's wrong with that?
I think you want to get this over with.
No, I don't.
Let's talk
Sorry.
about Dune 2. And if you don't mind, let me set the stage a little bit because sometimes I let you do the plot synopsis. Yes?
I can't explain this. Are you kidding me?
Okay. So Dune 2 is it's actually part two. It represents part two of the first Dune novel. There were 60 kabillion Dune novels. Exaggerate, but it's something like 20. And so the part one, which came out a couple years ago, and then this was part two, which covered the second half of the book. And most, I think, would agree that this part two really had most of the action from the first book. So it was really, but it was also, for anyone who knows anything about the trajectory of the novels, it was also functioned as a big setup for what happens in Dune later on. And I can go into that a little bit more. So in this one, you really get Paul Atreides becoming part of the Fremen. You really get him reclaiming his title. You really get all the stuff about how he becomes the one, which is referred to by a whole panoply of terms, which I was trying to explain to Dad the other day, the difference between the Lisan al-Gaib and the Kwisatz Haderach. So I was trying to like explain the difference between, but they all basically mean that he's the Messiah. So it's basically those are all shorthands for saying that he is the one, or in Matrix terms, he is Neo. So anyway, so I saw the film on Saturday in IMAX. You saw it on Thursday, the day that it opened in IMAX. So why don't we start since you feel like you don't have that much to say about it?
Oh
So
my God.
why don't you start with what you thought about it?
It was good. No, I'm just kidding. Um, yeah, it was a really, really cool experience, especially in IMAX because we sat in the back like left row and it was just like that we could all the bass was just and Hans
Yes.
Zimmer's score was and so it was super exciting and I think it just also a lot more things happening in this movie. A lot of people would argue differently for the first one, but I just felt like it was just so much setup and it was so much plot and so much world building that it's not like I could follow everything that was going on because it mostly we're just talking about it. But at least in this movie, like people were meeting, people were being killed, people were fighting, people were it just things were moving like way faster. Um, so as much as
Can I
yeah, what's
interrupt
up?
you and ask
Yeah.
you what you thought about the performances? And can I ask you to start with Timothée Chalamet because I know that you're not his biggest fan.
I think the acting was great. It's just like I'm I they serve their purpose. It's not like because it's I didn't think this movie was perfect, but it was perfect in the sense that it was a perfect experience, but it's not like I was attached to like each individual performance. I think
Hmm.
Timothy Chalamet was better in this movie. And he had to do a lot of more dramatic things. And that was really cool. And then Zendaya was in this movie more than 10 minutes, which was better. So she was also good. And then, Josh Brolin, and then Javier Bardem, Javier Bardem,
Javier Bardem. Hmm.
Bardem. Yeah, he was really good. I thought he was probably one of the better performances.
Why are you, can we just take a little side road? Why are you not a fan of Timothée Chalamet?
I'm not. uh, well, I don't.
Is it because the women of your generation are big fans of him?
I think, yeah, probably. I think it's just
You
he's
think
like
it's a
just
basic taste?
yes, he represents just like the most basic skinny pale white person, like just like he's embodied in that sort of mold, And I think and to have a movie especially that's making him out to be the Messiah and all that shit is like
Yeah,
kind of it's silly a little bit, but I don't hate him. It's just like I think
I
it's
don't hate him.
he just I don't really care at this point. Because, I know he's talented. He was, great in Little Women too. It's just like I don't really care anymore. But I also haven't seen that many movies with him. So, whatever.
Mhm. Okay. Just for fun, but also I was genuinely curious to know what was at the root of your ire. But I did not think he was good in Little Women. I thought his breakout role was in Call Me by Your Name, which I don't think you've seen. He was very, very good in Call Me by Your Name. And then there was a question in my mind about whether or not he'd be able to live up to big parts, after that, because that was such a small, intimate movie. And so much of it was in what was not said, in addition to what was said, I guess. And so he did a really effective job physically acting in Call Me by Your Name, like really showing his emotions without a lot of dialogue. And so in Little Women, I just thought he looked absurdly young to be any kind of marriage candidate.
Yeah, that's true.
I thought he looked like a prepubescent boy asking for Amy's hand in Little
But
Women.
wasn't that more common back in the time period?
I don't know. I mean, the adjective that I kept on thinking of in Little Women was that he was weedy. He was a weedy youth. Like, I kept on thinking he was a weedy youth. Like
Yeah.
he was just so skinny and so pale, and I didn't think that he also, I mean, to a certain extent, the character of Laurie is a bit of how can I say this? A bit of a playboy, little bit of a gadfly, like not really committed to anything, not really serious about anything. And so I think that it required him to really deliver a big moment when he finally committed to Amy and grew up and decided to be married. And I don't think that he delivered on that moment. However, I want to spend a little bit of time on this. I actually was fairly impressed by him as Paul Atreides. And I was surprised because there was so much in this movie that could have dwarfed him. Like the movie is overwhelming in terms of spectacle.
Yeah.
And so, to a large extent, I think that his performance held up to the spectacle. And that although there's a large part of that I attribute to Denis Villeneuve creating those moments for him to really actually deliver an effective performance. But anyway,
Yeah.
we can go more into that later. But is there anything else you want to talk about in terms of what you liked about the movie?
Yeah. I mean, just I'll say it as many times as I can, but it's just like technically such a amazing feat.
Yes.
Like there's no other there are not many other movies I could think of that really feel like enhanced as in the theater as much as that movie was. Um, and obviously it was uh it, part of the experience. It was like a packed theater, and I was with friends, um, and it was like the sequel to a movie, so we'd been anticipating it and stuff. But it just delivered. So uh, it just delivered on every front.
I really loved the movie. And I'll talk a little bit about what I love so much about the movie. Dad rated it as very good. Kept on saying, I don't know that I need to see this in IMAX. And I was like, no, you need to see this in IMAX. Like this is a little argument ahead of time. So then, but I do actually think that you need to see it in IMAX. I think you need to see. I think it is a spectacle. So I think that so I have read the book many, many times. I know parts of the book by heart. I'm very familiar with the mythology. And I finally, before watching Dune 2, after watching Dune 1, I finally read Dune Messiah just so that I could get an idea of what they were foretelling in Dune 2. And in Dune Part 2. And so I think that my main point that I want to make about this movie is that um, people used to say this about Avengers Endgame, that it was better than it needed to be. So they didn't expect that that movie needed to be as good as it was or as emotional as it was, given that it was just trying to tie all these different strands together. And I really love it when a movie is better than it needs to be. And by that I mean you get a lot of directors who focus on the spectacle part of it, like this thundering score, these incredible visual effects, incredible cinematography. I could just go on and on about that cinematography. Like there were so many shots that just took my breath away in terms of
Mm.
how beautifully they were framed. The one that immediately comes to mind is when during the Sardaukar raids, there's a scene where you see them jumping out of the ship, and they jump in this beautiful arc. Like you see these like,
Yeah.
figures silhouetted against the light, and it's just it's so beautifully framed. It's
Yeah.
framed to be a vertical shot. That's the other thing. Like on IMAX, you're looking, at basically I think IMAX is more square than rectangular, but it's still fairly rectangular. But either way, you're still looking at a shot that is framed to call attention to vertical majesty and vertical propulsion. And so that that shot was just gorgeous. And then I was sort of wondering, oh, how are they going to do the duel between, Fade Rotha and Paul? And that shot was interspersed with so many close-ups versus that silhouette against the sun. And so I think the cinematographer is a freaking genius. And apparently he and Denis Villeneuve are very close collaborators in deciding, like they storyboard how all of these shots are going to be framed. And I think that really shows. And the framing happens without slowing down the action any. You know what I mean? Like you're not just sitting there like staring at a shot with it's not inert. It's actually moving the action forward, but it's still gorgeous. But I think that Dune 2 was so good because it lived up to its spectacle. You know what I mean? Like it more than it there was a counterpart to the spectacle aspect of it, which were these very human moments where you both understood the scope of what was happening, like these geopolitical events
Yeah.
that were happening around spice, but you also understood that everything was taking place within the context of these very personal relationships. So I really loved when Gurney Halleck said, "You young pup," when he, reunited with Paul. Those moments really counter were such an effective counterbalance for the spectacle aspect of it. So I felt like it was we've been talking a lot in our recent episodes about being invested in the characters or not being invested in the characters, and I said I was not hugely invested in like the Poor Things characters, for example, but I was hugely invested in these characters. And also I was blown away by the spectacle of this movie, just blown
Yeah.
away by the spectacle of this movie.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Um, the other thing I want to say is that I've asked you these questions about how much a director is driving the whole ship, so to speak, or steering the whole ship versus how much of it is editor, how much of it is cinematographer, how much of it is music, blah, blah, blah. And I watched a lot of the cast interviews after I saw Dune Part 2. Um, and every single one of them talked extensively about Denis and how it was his vision. They deferred so much to Denis Villeneuve, that I've never seen a clear case being made that it is his vision, it is his artistic vision, it is his mind that is driving, how these movies were brought to life on screen. And so I was super, super impressed. I was wondering how much of a tyrant or a dictator he might be on set, like how particular he is. But I didn't get that sense from the interviews. I just got the sense that they were awed by how crystal clear his vision was down to the slightest detail.
Mhm.
So I will say that. And I know that Denis Villeneuve has made one of your favorite movies, which is also Arrival.
Yeah. I did love Arrival. And I having watched some of his movies now, it's like both Dunes and then Arrival and Blade Runner. I don't know if I'm missing any other ones, but um I can't
Have you seen
exactly.
Sicario?
No, I haven't actually.
Oh, Dad
Um
loves Sicario. That's one of Dad's favorite
yeah.
movies.
I can't really I haven't thought about this enough to eloquently put what his style is, what I think his style is, but thinking about it now, I think he creates very complex characters and complex plots. And I, while it doesn't make me personally connect with the characters that much because of how uh, sort of otherworldly it is and sort of difficult, it does make me extremely intrigued and interested. Like I just want to know what's going on.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think Blade Runner suffered a little bit from me not really feeling that much emotion. And I'm
Did
not
you
gonna
see the
say,
first Blade Runner before you saw the second
yeah,
one?
I did.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm not gonna say that like um I didn't care about the characters, but it's just like that was not my main focus. I think my main focus was the awe and the mystery and the suspense of what was going on in the movie. So that's like the only thing like Dune anything if anything was detracting about Dune, it would be that because Timothy Shaw what the Paul and whatever her name is, Zendaya's characters. Um
Johnny.
yes. Uh their romance was not, it's not like I was overly invested in their relationship. Like,
Hmm.
they got together, very cool, and then um he sees the truth or whatever, and then they grow apart. Um and that was really amazing and cool to see that. It's not like I was really feeling it. It's not like I was like, oh my God, like they're breaking up. Like he can't have Florence Pugh and Zendaya at the same time. That's crazy. Um like it was more exhilarating and interesting. So that has been a common theme, with Arrival too. That's been the main theme. But again, it's about
Okay.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's about the spectacle and about how it's being told. That's so amazing to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say that the relationship between Paul and Johnny, it underwent some of the biggest changes from the book. In one way, it was very true to the book. In another way, it expanded upon it in a way that was interesting to me, and I'll explain that in a bit. So, for the most part, I agreed with his what he cut out from the book or what he changed. I think that he changed things to help with the pacing, to not have to weigh things down too much. I think he changed things. He eliminated entire characters from the book because it's just impossible to keep track, and some people change pretty significantly. Like in the book, Liet Kynes, the planetologist who died in the first part, in the book, she's a he, and he is actually Chani's father. So it was to indicate that he was playing this dual role in this whole geopolitical situation where he was both working for the emperor as the planetologist, but he was also Fremen. Anyway, the interesting thing about Paul and Chani's romance in terms of how it differed is that I think that it changed because it was I think that Denis Villeneuve was making a really interesting point about religion, about the dangers of religious fanaticism. So Chani and others of her quote unquote generation and Fremen, they were very mistrustful of all that old mythology around Paul being the one or the Lisan al Gaib. They were basically like much like generations differ these days. They were basically saying we have to do whatever is possible to free our people. And religion is just another tool to enslave our people. And I think that it was making a really powerful point about, the dangers of fanaticism, particularly in terms of what's happened with Christian nationalism today. It's just that so many unspeakable things. And I think that the movie actually showed that Paul resisted the becoming the one as much as possible because he wanted, number one, to show the Fremen that he was one with them, that he was aligned with them. And then also he was afraid, like he was afraid of the responsibility and also what would happen because once he took the water of life because he realized that without that he could not be able to foretell what was going to happen, all of these different futures that could potentially come true. But at the same time, he was terrified of it because he knew that it would unleash once he got people to follow him, it would unleash a jihad basically, and he was very very frightened of that jihad. So it was this constant war between him taking back, like fighting back against the Harkonnens and taking back what was rightfully his in terms of being the Duke of Atreides versus unleashing a holy war that in the subsequent books lasts for years. So the subsequent book, and for people who are not familiar with the books, they have no idea that the jihad is the thing that is the biggest. Like there's no happy ending. In other words, Paul, it's just a constant battle of wills and a battle for power. But I will just say that in terms of that relationship, Zendaya in an interview made a point that really stuck with me, which is that she said that she thought that Denis, she was asked some silly question about how did it feel to have to act, to act with Timothy in these on-screen love scenes, but that stupid question that they always get asked. And she said, I think that Denis Villeneuve is really, really good at finding these moments, these intimate moments in the midst of all this grand spectacle and epic battles in order to really show human interaction. And when she said that, I actually wanted to go back and rewatch the movie because that reminded me of what I loved so much about Ryan Coogler when he made the first Creed and then when he made the first Black Panther. And so I really felt, especially when it came to Black Panther, but also with Creed, I felt that the first Creed, which was the only one he directed, I felt like the first Creed, Ryan Coogler toggled back and forth between these very intimate moments, when Apollo um, was getting to know, I forget her name now, the character played by Tessa Mae Thompson.
Hmm. You mean
Um,
Adonis was getting to know Bianca?
Adonis, yes, Adonis.
I'm a big fan of the Creed movies, if you didn't know that. Yeah. So
But anyway, so there were
continue.
these, yeah, but that moment where he was braiding her hair, everybody talks about that moment, where he was like helping her with her braids. When Zendaya said that about Denis, I actually remembered that about Ryan Coogler, and I agreed with her assessment. At the same time, um, I I I could totally understand why somebody would skip over those human interactions or think that they were cheesy. Like there were people who thought that there were the moments between Paul and Chani were cheesy. And I could totally understand why that wasn't, a person's jam. And I think that it has to do with the fact that the epic sequences were so fucking epic. Like they were so unbelievably epic. And it made me think about all the things, all the ingredients that make those sequences epic. So with the first example being whatchamacall the when Paul rides the worm, when he learns to ride the worm for the first time. And then the battle sequence, where he storms the Emperor's ship, and he's, laying out that little, and he's telling everybody, you're gonna come from the east, you're gonna come from the west. When those battle sequences actually start unfolding, like when you see that shot of all the worms coming up, I was literally my sequence. It was so crazy. It was just so, so, so crazy. And scenes like that, like when they are epic like that, then one of the things that I just tend to do afterwards is that I tend to like always start imitating little ticks from the movie. So like for the rest of the weekend, I was saying to your dad, I was like, may thy knife chip and
Yeah.
shatter.
Yeah. Yeah.
May thy knife chip and
It's
shatter.
so sick.
I was going around.
Yeah. I mean, going back to when I mentioned the pacing, it was just so all the set pieces were just amazing. So the balance between those intimate moments, like those are drawn out, those are like they give enough breathing room for those dialogue scenes for you to at least um feel for the characters and understand what they're going through so that
Yeah.
when the action comes, it's like it hits that much harder. And like, the difference in between the different spectacles was just so cool. Like the when Austin Butler, don't know. I see. I'm going by their actor names.
Yeah, Fade Rotha. His name is
When
Fade.
Fade Rotha
Yeah.
had his first battle in the arena,
Yes.
that was a super drawn out thing because it's sort of like it was sort of like a battle of attrition with that guy who wasn't drugged. So it was like more suspenseful. Um, but then when things are moving later in the movie, like when they got the whole war plan, like honestly, I think that whole lead up from the worms to like getting in the temple, maybe like 5 to 10 minutes, or like just like not that much
Yes.
time. It was like
No.
we're gonna get in there, we're gonna fucking blast open the door, we're just like boom, 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 like, and especially because it's so easy to draw that stuff out, especially with Dune because it is that amazing. Like honestly, most people would probably be fine if it was way longer, and if like you saw like more and more men just get killed. Like they only spent a couple seconds like showing that people were actually fighting. Like
Yeah.
they could have spent so much time on that, but they were like, no, that's not. We don't have to care. Like we know what's happening. We know it's sick. Like we don't have to overstay our welcome. And same with the battle with Fade Rotha, like and Paul. Like that was it was almost some things were almost like understated so that
Yes.
moments later would be emphasized. Um,
Yes.
and that was amazing. And last thing I think I'll mention was like the first worm. Yeah, and that's not just like that's a lot to do with editing and directing and all that, but a specific score moment that was amazing was when he gets on the worm for the first time. That score could like the hit of the score could have come in basically when he got on the worm. Like that when he got on the worm, we were kind of like, oh hell yeah, like he's on the worm. But but he's struggling to get like stand up and he has to like grapple onto the worm and he has to make sure he's on there. But then he stands up and then it's like "Ah," and
Yeah.
it's like and we're like, oh shit. And everybody's like, oh shit. So crescendos, they're so good at crescendos and like and pointed um pointed like points pointed
Yes.
statements about just characters and moments and it's just like yeah,
Yes.
it's so well done.
Yeah, I also appreciate the fact that it reminded me of something that was said about the Matrix, you know? So before the Matrix came out, superhero movies, it's hard to believe this, but superhero movies were languishing before the Matrix came out. And so The Matrix was not intended as a superhero movie. It was actually intended to be something just different, like a sci-fi movie. I remember the filmmakers were talking about this, the Wachowski now sisters, who were then the brothers. The Wachowskis were talking about how they wanted to just make the characters look super, super cool. You know what I mean? Like the Matrix had to be this place where they looked super cool. So they dressed them in these Prada outfits, these black leather Prada outfits to indicate that this world was not real. You know, it was the Matrix. And so I remember thinking, oh God, I really actually appreciate the fact that they made them look cool. So because before that movie, superhero movies or movies with, you know, with beings with supernatural powers,
Heidi
they,
Whitey's.
yeah, they looked ridiculous. They looked like they were wearing underwear or pajamas, you know? And so I think that the whoever did the production design or staged out that sequence of Paul riding the worm, I think that they made very specific decisions to make them look cool. Like there was something about the angle at which they were holding like the grappling hooks to show how much of an effort it took to control the worm.
Yeah.
That whole theory of how to control the worm is explained in the books, by the way. But anyway, the way that they and then you get the side shot where their you know their headpiece is like streaming along in this dust whirlwind, right? And then the sound is like you know, and they're holding on with all of their strength, and it's also the biggest fucking worm that they could possibly imagine. Like that's very true to the book. It's like a grandfather worm. It's the worm of all worms, you know. And so that I think they just staged that, and I'm so grateful that they made it look cool because the worms were considered to be the most untranslatable thing about the books.
Really?
And yeah, and
Just
apparently
because
they
of like a like what? Oh yeah,
the
I mean you can.
scale and the size, and also because, you know, when David Lynch made his version of Dune, which a lot of people had thought was ridiculous, there's no way that CGI was up to par.
Yeah,
And there was
yeah.
CGI didn't even exist at that time, I don't think, in that way. And so I think the point is, I also heard about how they did the worms because the cast addresses in the interviews, and Denis again and his production designer, whoever, or his VFX people, they made a very conscious choice about what was real about that sequence versus what was CGI. And what was real was that they built a warm platform for him to stand up, for people to stand on, you know? So,
Mm,
and that one that actually had these sort of, jittery, characteristics to it that could like shake like that, so that they could just blast a freaking wind machine and
wow.
dust at the person to make it look like it was going to be real, which I
Mm,
think makes such a difference because if you think about what that would have looked like if they tried to put that person on an entirely CGI worm, it wouldn't have felt as tactile. You know what I mean?
mhm.
Like it would never have felt as real or as momentous as it did. So I love filmmaking choices like that, as you know, I really, really do. And I love anything that sort of propels a story. And I love anything that creates those moments in movies where you stand up and you're like, yeah. So it's like all those people who recorded those reactions during Endgame, like when Captain America grabs the hammer, for example, or when the portals open, and then everybody in the theater is like screaming and losing their minds. I kind of had that reaction when during certain moments of Dune, not nearly as much as Endgame because I was more invested in the storylines in Endgame, but definitely in Dune, I felt like the spectacle was really emotional on its own terms. It was emotional on its own terms. It
Yeah.
was epic. So I
Um,
loved it.
yeah. And one thing coming back to, well, you just mentioned that in the book they explain things more.
They
So
do.
and that just makes me think of like, because I haven't read the Lord of the Rings books. So I don't know, but I did try one time and it was fucking just so complicated. Like so
Yeah.
there's so much jargon, like I don't know what is going on. So, and I've talked about how Dune is also pretty complicated. Like there's a lot
Yes.
of names I don't like I try to remember. The joke is like who are the Bene Gesserit? Like everybody's throwing around like who is that? But I get like when I'm watching, I understand what the roles are and what people are doing. But when they're just talking about it, it can be hard to follow sometimes. And it's interesting because it wasn't detracting, but it's definitely something to note. Like, you know, taking something like Attack on Titan, where if you know the whole world and the whole
Hmm.
story,
Yeah.
it's super complicated. Like the whole like I think I gave you this whole explanation, but
Yeah.
it's branches in so many different things. But when it starts off, the story, it's so simple. It's humans trapped and Titans eat them, and that's like the whole thing. That's like,
Right.
but there's like this mystery that you know there's more to it. You just don't know what it is, and that's what keeps you invested. Um, but and it starts off simple, and then it becomes complicated as it unravels all the things. But
Yeah.
Dune,
Layers and layers and layers.
right?
Yeah.
But Dune sort of starts off giving you everything. Like these are the Harkonnens, and these are the Bene Gesserit, and this is Paul Atreides, and he's a part of this house. And then he goes to the Fremen, but the Fremen, like so, that's the first movie. It's just like all this stuff, like, and because they're setting everything up. But then this movie was like, okay, now we can get to the simple shit. It's just like things are gonna happen, and they start happening, and then
Yeah.
we don't have to worry as much about knowing things. That's why like people I've been talking to are like, yeah, I want to see Dune 2, but I haven't seen the first one yet. I got to watch the first one. I'm like, I mean, yeah, sure, you can maybe watch the first one. You can get everything you need to know basically in the first 30 minutes, maybe, like in Dune 2. So, because I think it's that much of an amazing experience on its own just to go and see, like, but I guess to a lot of people, I mean, it's like not watching New Hope before Empire Strikes Back or whatever.
Yeah.
So I get it.
In the book, by the way, Paul makes it much clearer that his marriage to Princess Irulan is purely for political convenience, and he basically says that he'll never love her, he'll never give her a child, and he reassures Chani on this point. And that becomes a much bigger storyline in the subsequent books. So, but in this book, it
Oh my
it
God.
yeah, the whole conflict between Paul and Chani and him. I felt like the conflict was really much more about him taking up his being power. Like, I felt like the theme was more explicit that he did not say no to power. Do you know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
and to Chani, he was really not. about equality. He had decided to step up into his heritage and his title. And in the book, he pretty much grabs it all. Like he becomes the emperor, and he also negotiates with all the monopoly interests who are holding onto the spice. He basically says, if you do not give me the majority of your holdings in spice and the spice trade, I will blow up every single spice field that there is.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's so yeah. So it was interesting. Some of these variations from the book were really interesting to me, but I actually I don't know if I would recommend that anybody read Dune. I don't. I think it is a lot like Lord of the Rings. I think it's only upon rereading that I appreciate all of the details and all of the filler, but it can feel like a slog. I
Mm.
will say though that the action scenes that are so incredibly well done in the movie, the both Dune movies are also well done in the books. So you are in the books, you're like slogging through interminable pages of geopolitical nonsense and
Yeah.
all this intrigue and oh, can you take my place and assume power and we have to be subtle about this and blah blah blah. And so there's all this like stuff that happens, and then all of a sudden you get to the action sequences, right? Like the final knife duel between Paul and Fade Rafa, and it is written beautifully and tightly and concisely. So that's like really interesting to me that Denis Villeneuve definitely had a template to pull from in terms of pacing those scenes because they are among the best written scenes in the book.
Mm.
So I will just say that I really, really enjoyed watching the movie. I really enjoyed watching it in IMAX, although I'm now starting to think that that particular IMAX theater is just always overheated. So there's just like because we
Oh,
were practically melting into a puddle during
damn. That just,
Into the
yeah, that
Spider-Verse.
ruins everything too.
Yeah, it was pretty hot. But the other thing that this just watching Dune 2 made me think about is how the big tentpole movies that really deliver are kind of few and far between these days. So the pandemic, obviously, and then the strikes really shut things down for a while and really delayed things for a while. So I was just, what I mean by tentpole movies are movies that are just a rattling good time. Like they're just a really, really good time. They don't have to be the most important film of the year in terms of like, political significance or social
Yeah,
significance.
yeah,
They are just they're so entertainment. They're pure entertainment, And so Endgame, and then there was this long drought, right? Really, really long drought. And it was especially getting disappointing because the Marvel movies were just sucking so badly.
yeah,
And then the next big entertainment movie was Top Gun Maverick, which you and I
yeah,
saw twice in the theaters. And I actually felt that both times we saw in the theaters were totally worth it. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
totally worth it to see both times. And so I think that Dune 2 might be I think I might want to catch it in the theaters one more time before I see it on TV.
yeah.
Because there are just certain scenes that I would just love to see again. I would love this, and also maybe not have to plug my ears quite so much.
I mean, yeah, me too. And last year, that movie for me was John Wick 4. Um, and
Oh,
also,
interesting.
there were a bunch of anime movies that I thought were like, that to that level. I'm checking my letterbox right now to see if there were any sort of like big ones that were just like pure entertainment. Maybe like Puss in Boots. But like just yeah, just huge spectacles. Yeah. Okay, one last thing I want to mention, and I think this theme is like the theme I'm trying to get across is that it was like such a great experience, and I want to do it as many times as I can in the theater, or go see it as many times as I can in the theater. But there were just some things like just as a me personally had me detached. So like I mentioned the complexity and the characters, but another thing was just like just the context and the framing of the story. Like I know since it's an adaptation from a book, it's going off of what the book is, but it's sort of, it's a white savior story. Like it's a story about, a white character and how he's perceived as the Messiah or not. And,
Correct.
in the first movie, I think it stood out to me more just because they kept talking about the Fremen and like and not really giving them much time at all. But in this movie, there was a lot of time with the Fremen and a lot of time with Paul and a lot of and like it was and the conflict was just more interesting. So, but it's just like it's just very blatant because all the Fremen are black and brown actors, and then Paul is just the skinniest, palest white dude. Um, so it's hard for me personally not to not see that. And
I think it is a legit critique of the movie.
yeah.
Yeah,
And a lot of people say, especially now, right now, like with things going on in the Middle East, like it could just stand out. So
right.
like as much as it didn't really dampen my experience of the movie, it still is something that stood out to me and makes me not fully, immerse myself or connect, So, but that I think it's important to mention that just because like, and it's it's not like it's anything new. Like movies been doing that forever, but like, it's just another one.
Yeah, I don't I think that it would have taken I'm curious. The Orientalism and the white savior thing are very much present in the books. Although I think the Fremen are very much more fleshed out in the books.
Hmm.
So I think the Fremen as a people and as an enslaved people, as a colonized people, I think they're much more fully depicted in the books, and I think that Dune Part Two made an effort to bring them more fully to life. But I don't think there's any getting around the white savior problem. And I mean, I guess that they could have chosen to make Paul not white. But I also think that there's a point about the corruption of um, white privilege and white uh, um, quote unquote hierarchy.
Yeah.
I think that there's a point that they're making which sits uneasily with the white savior plot. Do
Yeah,
you know what I
absolutely.
mean?
Yeah.
Like I think that they are showing how bloated and corrupt white overlords and
Yeah.
white colonialism really is. But at the same time, to have Paul then be the savior in the book, Frank Herbert is making a bid to say that Paul is trying to humble himself in front before the Fremen. So he keeps on identifying himself with Fremen, the Fremen cause, much more than he does. But then at the end, he claims his ducal
Right.
heritage or his
Yeah.
birthright. Do you know what I mean? So I don't think that either the book or the movie succeed in reconciling that. And the movie that this is compared to a lot, particularly because it's set in the desert, is Lawrence of Arabia, which also had like which is considered to be one of the most classic movies of all time, and shot by David Lean, but is also a white savior.
Yeah.
So
And yeah, it's not like it does a bad job. It does a great job of like portraying the conflict and it's not like we're rooting for Paul the whole way. It's like we're sort of, we're viewing it in a very critical sense. But it is just that it's centered around him and it's, that's typical.
yes, the interesting thing about, by the way, Paul was intended to be the result of the Bene Gesserit's eugenics program, meaning that they wanted to breed to get a daughter who would rule, who would give them much more political advantage, right? And Jessica screwed that up or deliberately disobeyed them because she wanted to give Duke Leto a son. Leto a son. And so Paul, how can I say this? He represents the thwarting of that political maneuvering,
Yeah.
and so that's why when he was wrestling with whether or not he would accept his fate as the Kwisatz Haderach, can't say these words. He
Yeah.
when he was struggling with his fate or with one of these possibilities in his future, he that's why he kept on strongly identifying himself with the
Fremen.
Fremen,
Yeah.
right? And actually, that's I thought that it was very sweet when that line that they played in the trailer when he said to Chani, "I would very much like to be equal to you," because that I think was a signal that he was trying to start from a place of humility, even though he ultimately ended up doing exactly what all white dudes, which is to just
Right.
take the
Yeah.
power.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. But I agree it is a problem. And yeah, but overall, just thought it was a really an amazing achievement as a movie.
Hmm. Yeah.
So do you want to move on to the Oscars? Did
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
watch the Oscars?
I did. I went to a little get together and we just watched the whole thing from start to finish.
Yeah, I
And
did not know it was beginning at 4 p.m. I was like, what? What?
yeah. But right away almost crying because Davine Joy Randolph won. And that was very cool. I was so happy that she won because I think that not only was she the best in that category, like she just really deserved it. So and her speech was amazing, and yeah, love her.
Yeah, yeah. So everybody is talking about the Emma Stone, Lily Gladstone thing.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's so interesting because there's so many reasons given. So what people were predicting was that whoever won SAG, Screen Actors Guild, would then win the Oscar because that's how it usually happens. So everyone was going to these like really arcane theories because they said that the Academy has changed its membership to include many more international members. So even though SAG is American voters, and they represent a large part of the Academy voters, but adding all those international voters meant that there was a high likelihood that they would break for Yorgos Lanthimos and Emma Stone over Lily Gladstone, which was such an American story. So that was one reason that was given.
yeah,
And then the other reason that was given was that Lily Gladstone simply was not on screen enough. So here I am really hampered by the fact that I have not seen Killers of the Flower
yeah.
Moon.
Same, same.
And so I am sort of bothered. I was sort of bothered at myself that I did not watch Killers of the Flower Moon going into it. But I have this thing about Martin Scorsese that I'm not that huge a
Yeah,
fan.
and it's a 4 hour movie again. Four. I know they keep making jokes about how long movies are, and they're kind of hacky, but like it is true. They're
Yes.
super long.
Yeah. Hi, having seen Poor Things though, I I mean Emma Stone is that movie. She is
Yes,
the
yes,
entire movie is centered on her.
yeah,
So, even though I am not that big a fan of Poor Things, like I just did not like the movie just left me cold, even though I think it's an achievement on many. Like I thought it was totally well deserved on the
yeah.
production design.
Swept to the design categories, just like
Yes,
one
swept the
after
design.
another.
Yes. And I actually thought that was well deserved. Like that's just a movie that just left me cold on certain things. But then I thought people are a little bit pissed at Emma Stone because she won the Oscar for La La Land back in 2017. And I think that they just wanted her to sit the fuck down.
Yeah,
I think that they wanted her to
you
sit the
could
fuck
tell in
down.
her reaction that she was sort of in line with that thinking.
Well,
Did you
I
see
don't,
that? Did you
I
see her?
did.
Yeah, because her face dropped like when they cut to her, like because she fully, I don't think, expected or like really like obviously she was honored, but and that's what sort of conveyed in her speech. But like immediately you just see her like, oh man, like people are gonna be mad about that. But
Yes.
also,
She
it's amazing.
campaigned so hard though. She
Hmm.
campaigned so, so, so hard. And I have been thinking a lot about this. I don't know if I'm right in what I'm about to say, but if I were a person of color competing in a category like that, I would hate the thought that I had won something because somebody else had sat back. Does that make sense?
Yeah, obviously, but
Like, I would not wanna know that Emma Stone sat this one out. I would
right,
I
yeah,
would wanna know that everybody put their best foot forward in terms of campaigning, and even though the deck may have been unfairly stacked in terms of who gets privilege, who gets the opportunities to even make movies like Poor Things, because that is the inequity that everybody's reacting to, by the way, is that when people win Oscars, their opportunities open up, although they open up differently for white people than they do for people of color. So, lots of people of color win an Oscar and they do not go on to like get all these doors open for them, although they definitely get much more capital in Hollywood in the studio system to make movies they get more offers. You know what I mean? They get more exposed. So it is really an inequitable place, and there's no question that white actors like Emma Stone get a lot more advantages. They just get a lot more. They have privilege. They just have privilege.
yeah,
So, but at the same time, I that is the inequity that's at the heart of this decision. But at the same time, I am constantly thinking about the fact that number one, there would be no Poor Things without Emma Stone's performance. It is the center of that whole movie. And then number two, I feel like Lily Gladstone, even though she was crushed at not winning, I think that I just can't imagine that she would want, Emma Stone to have sat back and not campaign. But I do
All right.
think that Emma Stone immediately felt guilty about it. Yes. I do feel that I didn't think about that when I saw all those TikToks of her reaction, but I think that you're right about that. So
Yeah, and I mean, again, it's going back to, yeah, like Emma Stone was that movie, but Killers of the Flower Moon was Martin Scorsese, and the main character was Leo DiCaprio,
Leonardo
right?
DiCaprio, yes,
Yeah, and not Lily Gladstone, and it
right.
wasn't
She was
Amer
off screen for long periods of time.
yeah, and the song that they were nominated for was a Native American song, but it was not a Native American movie. It was a movie that utilized
Correct.
Native Americans. So,
Correct.
if it had been a movie that was made by Native Americans for, that audience, then maybe she would have had a better chance. But that's not what it
If
took
it
Martin
had
Scorsese making a movie about that. Then,
That's right. That's such an excellent point, Eric. If it had centered the Osage point of view, and if it had centered Lily's character
mm,
more, and it was told more from their perspectives, then I think that I would be fucking pissed that if she had lost to Port. Does that make sense? But
yeah,
it
yeah,
it didn't feel like the playing field was level to begin with, you
yeah,
know? And so that's sort of where I come down. But I think that it's a continuing conversation about representation and what it really means to have adequate representation and what it really means to open up opportunities.
yeah. But
I
again, it is incredible that she was nominated, Lily
Yes,
Gladstone was, and that's like an incredible honor, and that shouldn't be like
yes,
overlooked.
yes. I knew it was going to happen, and I was still so disappointed that Paul Giamatti did not win over
Oh
Cillian
yeah,
Murphy.
yeah,
I did not. I keep on thinking back to Oppenheimer. I can't remember anything that Cillian Murphy did or said. I cannot remember anything about that movie. Isn't that weird? Like
yeah,
I can think about how the plot unfolded and how the test was done, and I can think about the sort of pressure cooker aspect of it and about the pressure cooker aspect of the hearings. I
yes,
still think about Rami Malek's unexpected like testimony, but I just don't remember anything specific that Cillian Murphy did as Oppenheimer. And
yeah.
I remember so many specific things that Paul Giamatti did or said as part of the
Yes,
holdovers.
yes.
Do you see what
I
I
think
mean?
I think all the characters in Oppenheimer were blank slates because
Yes,
they were just playing the people that were in the story. Very good, very well. They were playing them very
right.
well. But like, and I hated RDJ's speech.
I did too.
It was like he's such a I mean, as much as I didn't think he needed that much time, deserved for all the Jimmy Kimmel jokes thrown at him, like uh
Yeah.
it was just like he's just such a I don't know, he's weird.
He comes
He
across as
is
smart.
Tony Stark. He's literally Tony Stark. Like he
Yeah, he
walked up
is
and he
Tony
was like,
Stark.
like fucking I act like a billionaire, but I'm not. And I'm just an actor. But yeah, I don't think he should have won also. So anyways, Oppenheimer like big whoop, and they won Best Picture too, which I predicted. But uh I'm trying to think of what should have won instead. I don't know. Just like yeah, whatever. And
I
Barbie
don't
didn't
know.
win anything.
Yes. So why don't we get to our final point,
Okay,
which
but
is
they did have the best song performance. I'm Just Ken
ever.
was so funny. Oh my
That was
God.
unbelievable.
Yes,
It was
yes.
unbelievable. It was
Yeah.
unbelievable.
He
So,
killed that.
I mean,
Ryan Gosling.
no, everybody could not stop talking about that performance. But when I was watching it, I think my jaw was on the floor.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
just absolutely dying. I was dying at how committed he was to it. And I sort of love that about Ryan Gosling, that he just takes it so seriously. Like he doesn't do anything without giving it his 100%.
Yes, yes.
And I love that. I actually really, really love that about him, to the point where I was actually watching TikToks because people wanted to see from other angles. Like there's this point where he's like taking the hand of the cameraman and leading him up, and he kisses the hand, and they wanted to see whether or not that actually happened. And it's this poor cameraman who is following him up on the stage.
Yeah.
And number one, the things that those roaming cameramen have to wear.
Yeah, the Steadicams
Yeah,
and
the
all
Steadicam,
that.
that like the whole rig that they have to wear, it looks insanely heavy. And so Ryan Gosling is leading him up on stage, and this guy is getting all these shots and standing on the very edge of the stage. And sure enough, he absolutely did kiss him on the hand before leaving on the stage, which was incredible.
That's great.
So yeah, it was great. But
Yeah,
I
they were
love
good
that.
at yeah. There were good amount of jokes, or I mean good amount of good jokes. And then, some like things I was like, whatever. Because it was Jimmy Kimmel. I don't really I know I think you like Jimmy Kimmel, but I think you don't
Yeah,
think he's
that
okay.
and I do.
Yeah, but I like it was definitely probably the most inoffensive Oscars because they got somebody who had hosted before, so it was familiar. There were a lot of great movies, so that was just kind of like a good bed. Like it was a good year for movies.
Yeah,
And then they had a lot of just good gags and good set pieces. But nothing that was like um, would mess you up. So
yeah,
that was cool.
yeah. I thought it was a pretty decent telecast. I don't think that Jimmy Kimmel, I think he's a decent host. I think that you did not grow up in the era of Billy Crystal, but I do think that Billy Crystal was the best host ever, and he
Oh
did it
my,
for many years
yeah.
running.
I didn't know that. That's cool.
Oh, you didn't? Oh my God.
No.
Everybody, he did
I
it
know
for
he.
it.
I gotta look up clips of that.
Oh,
That's so funny.
he did at least he did it at least 7 or 8 times, and I think that because Billy Crystal is such a he's a great
It's
comedian.
personable.
He sings, he dances, he's fabulous. So he
Yeah,
he is considered to be the consummate Oscar host, the
cool.
best Oscar host ever. Interestingly enough, in terms of predictors, when they talk about like SAGs predicting acting awards, they Sarah says that editing is always the predictor for Best Picture. It's the most accurate
Haha,
predictor. Isn't that
yeah,
interesting? So
that's so funny.
she said if she goes if Jennifer Lame or Lam, whatever, however, if Jennifer Lam wins editing for Oppenheimer, then Oppenheimer is definitely winning Best Picture. She said it's almost never failed. Isn't that interesting?
That's so
That
cool.
yeah, the
Yeah, I know.
we're,
Yeah,
we're
it is
so
the best
absurd.
part. So
We're so instrumental to the Best Picture part of it.
yeah,
So overall, the Oscars are what they are, and it's an institution that's going through a lot of changes. But this year, I do think that there are a lot of interesting movies, and I think that in particular, I don't think I'm ever going to see Zone of Interest. I do think I want to see Anatomy of a Fall. So, but
I
I
definitely,
don't.
yeah,
Yeah.
I want to see that.
But I did love the fact that the Oscars, that the actors, the former winners, presented the categories, the
Yeah, that
nominees
was cool.
individually. Although I think that Jennifer Lawrence did the worst job
She
possible.
was like, she did not give a shit. She just read the teleprompter. I'm here to do my job. I don't care. Everything else was really sweet. Like even if they were reading from a teleprompter, they could tell that you were trying to actually put some care into it. But like,
Yes.
and I was excited for Jennifer. I thought she was going to be kind of quirky and funny, but like,
Yes.
she was very straight.
Yes.
Yeah.
People were wondering why she was so terrible, and they think that it was because I mean, she and Emma Stone are best friends, so they were thinking that she actually was so hoping that she could do something for Emma Stone, and then instead got to who did she present to? She presented someone she didn't know.
It wasn't it to supporting too? Was it supporting or main actress?
It was
Because
main actress.
oh, okay. Well, yeah.
Yeah, I don't
Um,
remember who it was, but
oh,
anyway.
and she presented to Lily Gladstone,
Oh,
didn't she?
Lily Gladstone, that was it. That's why it was
Yeah.
considered to be such
Oof.
a like it just sucked.
Oh yeah, that I
Yeah, so
remember thinking like, oh damn, that sucks.
yeah. But
Um,
overall, I am left in this time after having seen Dune, after having watched the Oscars, I'm left feeling that um, I'm glad that we have movies in the world. That's all. I'm really glad. I really look forward to different experiences like
yeah,
that. And so it makes
those
me
are
feel
that was
hopeful.
the most amount of movies I'd watched for the Oscars. Well, not for the Oscars, but like in that were in the Oscars. Like and that's because A-list. So very cool. And I'll keep that and keep going to see movies when I can.
You haven't seen Anatomy of a Fall, have you?
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's on streaming.
Yeah, I've heard it's very good.
Okay, maybe we'll watch it together when you're home.
Yeah, sounds good.
I actually thought we were gonna record this when you were home.
Oh, well, we'll do the next one at
We'll
home.
do the next one when you're home. I
Yeah.
can't wait to see you. I miss you a ton.
I miss you too. And I'm so excited to come home. And sorry that sounded sarcastic, but I am serious. I want to go home.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So till next time, thanks to all of our listeners and watchers. I love you very much. I can't wait to see you. And I'm glad we got this one in.
Love you too. All right. See you next time.